We're now on Daf Yutes Amid Beis. Dim Kain Mafsadis Leila Kamaisa. In other words, these two rulings that you gave, Rav Huna, are Habahatalia. They're interdependent. And if you can say kosher in one, it's going to be possible in the other. If you can say kosher in the case where the middle shlish was bahagrom and the carrier over the death penalty was without a valid shechita, and you're going to say it's kosher, then in the opposite case, where you started with a shlish of hagroma and you ended with a shlish of hagroma, then it's got to be kosher. Because, let's see it inside. He says, Hasam, my timer machsharta. Right? Hasam, I think, refers to the first ruling, let's see if I'm right, of Rav Huna, right? Where the first third was Bagrama and the last third was Bagrama. And Rav Huna ruled that that was kosher. And why? The chinafka chiyusa, everything depends upon that crossroads between life and death. And bechshera konafka, right? Because you shechted outside on the first shlish and the last shlish, but the middle shlish, which is the key of keys, that's when the animal dies, that you did in the right place. And that's why you were machshir. If that be the case, then when we flip it around, but we're going to apply the same underlying definition, then kinafka chiyusa, right, where the first and third thirds were in the right place, by grama konafka. And therefore you should retain your second psak, that it's treif in the case where the first and the third third were in the wrong place, because then you're saying that the key of keys is that transition between life and death. Ikla Rav Nachman l'sura bo mine shachat shlish v'higrim shlish v'shachat shlish. So again, he has rov shchita in the right place, but the transition between life and death was with Bagrom. Now, Amalei lav hainu de Rabbi Lezer bar Yomi. The Amar Rabbi Lezer bar Yomi shchita asuya kemasrek kshera. Okay, now this is a bit of a challenge here because, the statement of Rabbi Lezer has to do with a shchita that you do jagged. In other words, normally, you slice into the animal straight. But what he did was, he went like this, like waving back and forth. And Rabbi Lezer bar Yomi says it's a perfectly good shchita. Okay, what does that? What does that have to do with the price with shachat shlish v'higrim shlish? So Rav Nachman assumes that Rabbi Lezer bar Yomi is talking about a case in which the shechita began in the proper area and veers outside that area, and it came back to the original valid area, which is exactly our case, that they asked Rav Nachman, shachat shlish in the proper place, higrim shlish in the unproper, then it came back to the proper case. Frek the Gemara, v'dilma b'makom shechita. Maybe Rabbi Lezer was not talking about a case where he started in the right place and then he went out to the wrong place, came back to the right place. No. He's talking about the whole shechita from beginning to end was in the right place. And now you're going to have to ask, so what did Rabbi Lezer bar Yomi discover America here? What did he teach me? Maybe there's halach in shechita that's got to go slice it straight down. No curves. The lekan here, he curved it around. Kamash Malon, that's what Rabbi Lezer wants to teach me. But it's not that in the middle he did a shlish outside of the, Bagram. Yosef Rabbi Abba Chori Rav Kana v'Yosef Rav Kana Kami Rav Yehuda v'Yosef v'Kamar. So the one who is a Talmud, but he's in the first row, is Rav Kahana. And the Rebbe is Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Abba is in the back row. Rav Kahana is in the front row. And Rabbi Yehuda is the Rebbe. So the one who's sitting closest to the Rebbe in the middle row is, or the front row, if you want to call it, is Rav Kahana. So he asks the following question to Rabbi Yehuda. Shachat shlish, v'higrim shlish. It's exactly the same case that we had before in Rav Nachman. Shachat shlish ma'u. Amalei shchitasa kshera. Okay, so far so good. That's exactly what Rav Nachman had said before. And that means that all you need is Rov, Simon, Bekashrus. Even though in the middle, carrying over that main point, life and death was Bagroma, it's kosher. Okay, now let's take the opposite case. And Rav Kahana is pressing Rabbi Yehuda. And he says the following, Higrim Shlish. He started on the wrong foot. B'shachat Shlish, v'higrim Shlish Ma'u. Now, we just finished establishing that everything depends upon Rov Shchita. Now, in this case, the Rov Shchita was Bagrama. Omalei Shchitasa Psula. And basically, what we just had now in this last piece of Shakalitaria is exactly what Rav Chizda was saying to Rav Huna before. That in these two cases, the ruling is always going to be the flip side, the opposite. But now Rav Kana comes up with a third question. Shachat b'makom nekev. So the trachea is damaged. There's a hole in the trachea. Now he just shechts, putting the knife into the hole, and he continues with the shchita. That's what we said was the sugya later on that we didn't get to yet. On Chav Zayin, Chav Ches, where as long as you did the most of the shchita, then it's kosher. However, shachad upaga bo nekev mahu. Can we do it in the reverse? Not that you put the knife into the hole in the trachea, but rather you put the knife in the healthy part of the trachea, and then it links up, and the shechita completes itself when it comes in contact with that hole. So you and I would say, well, when it comes in contact with the hole, that is garnished. That's nothing. Amalei shchitasa psula. Rabbi Yehuda says that the shechita is possible. I mean, why is it possible? I mean, let's be consistent. If you started with a hole and then you continue the hole, the shechita is kshera. So why can't you do it the other way around? Why can't you start with your shechita and end with the hole? But the answer again is going to be that in the case where you start with the hole, you carried the animal over the death point. But in the other case, you ended your shechita with a hole. And also Rabbi Abba Amru Kamid, when this ruling of Rabbi Yehuda was brought in front of Rabbi Lazar, also Rabbi Lazar Amru Kamid Rabbi Yochanan, he in turn brought it to his Rebbe, his Rabbi Yochanan, Amalei Maishna. Right? Rabbi Yochanan responded the way we responded. What difference does it make whether you start with the hole or you end with the hole? Amalei, Rabbi Lazar said to him, you know, it's very interesting because Rabbi Lazar is a Talmud, but he's challenging his Rebbe. And he says to him, Shachar b'makom nekev. Right? If he starts with the hole, is nasa kamish shachar over k'chav show. We have a halacha that if a guy starts the shechita, it's garnished garnished, it doesn't register, and the Yisrael could finish the shechita. Here also, you started with a hole, and you continue. So the hole is no worse than a shechita of an akul. But shachar upagabo nekev, in the reverse case, where he starts the shechita and then he hits the hole, nasa kamish shachar Yisrael v'gamar over k'chav. the completion of the shechita was done by the akum, and that's clearly possible. Rabbi Yochanan is not impressed. Kari Aleh, he said about him, Ovi Kochavim. Not that he accused Rav Plus of being an Ovi Kochavim, but he was trying to say that the Ovid Kochavim here is nothing. It doesn't register at all. As Rava explains it, Omar Rava, Shapir Kalei, Ovid Kochavim. Right, Rabbi Yochanan was justified in using that exclamation of Ovid Kochavim, because Rabbi Elazar's analogy between the case of starting the shechita and then getting into the hole, it's like the Ovid Kochavim finished the shechita, is Bishlei Mahasam, if he starts the shechita with the hole, is then Mishchat Ruba. Right, so let's take the case where the Jew starts the shechita and the guy finishes the shechita. Is Havi Leil Yisrael Mishchat Ruba. We require that the Yisrael do Rova the shechita, v'lo shachat. Why? Because the Yisrael only did half of the trachea, he cut, and the guy did the other half. And ki nafka chiyusa, when it tips over the 51%, the other Dovikachav nafka, who actually killed the animal, was the shechita of the guy. But hacha, in here, in the case in the Gemara on Daf Chav Zayin, there the first half of the shechita was a damaged trachea. Michte mishchat shchachit, mali makam nekev, mali pagabo nekev. In other words, as long as the Yisrael cuts the right, because the hole was only the first half of the trachea. So the Yisrael, when he starts with the hole and ends it, he does most of the shechita, and he's responsible for the animal dying. And therefore, says Rava, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, avodas kochavim, his exclamation is justified because mali poga nekev. Who cares whether or not he started with the shechita? I'm sorry, we started with the nekev and then he did the shechita on the rest, or the other way around, where he started with the shechita. As long as he started with the shechita and it linked up to the nekev, and he did, that which is over the line, the finish line of 51%, then he was responsible for the death of the animal. That's a perfectly good shechita. Okay, so now we're up to the Mishnah here in the middle or second third of Yud Tes Amud Beis. Hashochet min hatzdadim. Okay, so to learn this Mishnah, we really need. I'm going to need Steve's help to send me some pictures here. If you could get me some pictures about where Malika takes place in the case of an oath. Is it through the neck or from the front back? So Hashochim and Atstadim. So as far as Shechita is concerned, then Shechita is min Atstadim. And that's exactly the way the Torah wants the Shechita, from the sides of the neck. Right. He says in the note here, in the name of Rashi, don't think that Hashochim and Atzadim Shchitas Ksher means B'diavad. He only mentions it in a B'diavad formula because he wants to introduce cases where it's possible. But really, this is even Lechatchila, because that's exactly the way the Torah wants you to do Shechita. However, the opposite is true in the case of Malika. Hamolik min Atzadim Malikasa Psula. Because the Torah in Vayikra Perek says Malik has to be Mimul Arpo. Now, what that means, we're going to try to rack our brains and figure it out. Mimul Arpo. Mimul Arpo in English is faces the back of the head. So again, where shchita is on the sides of the neck, malika is on the back of the neck, below the skull. So again, my intelligence is a little bit limited. I need a little bit of a picture here, which I don't have. But maybe as we go along, we'll get, we'll be able to imagine what this looks like. But in any event, the main bottom line here is that where shchita is kshera, malika is psula. Now we go the other way around. Hashochim in a oref, that's exactly where malika has to be min oref. As we mentioned before, the Torah says mimul arpo. In the case of shchita, shchita psula. He didn't shech min atzodim, but rather he shechted min oref. He performs shchita from the nape. So if I understand, again, I'm just trying to imagine it in my mind. The cow's head goes this way, and therefore the simonim are underneath the cow's head, and the nape or the back, right, the neck is the other way around, and you can't shech from there. Again, if I want to put it in just like terms that'll help me remember it, when the knife hits the neck, maybe it breaks the neck of the animal, and that's not what shchita is all about. Shchita is to sever the simonim. So if he shechs from the back, which is called arpo, then he's shechting by cutting the neck bone and then finally reaching the two simonim. Oh, good. This is very good. Okay, I missed this note. The pages and pages of notes here, but I missed this one line here, which Baruch Hashem, I think we were on the right track. He says the following: when one performs shchita from the neck, the nape, he'll sever the neck bone. At that point in time, he hasn't even gotten to the simonim. The animals are treifa. Very good. Now, the opposite is true with regard to malika, molik mina oref, right? We said that it says mul arpo in the beginning of Vayikra, and that's malika kshera. Again, kshera doesn't mean b'di'evet. That's exactly what you do for malika. So the Kohen takes his thumb. It's got to be his right thumb because the avodah has to be done b'yamin, and he digs his nail into the nape or the neck of the bird. And then he finally reaches one of the two simonim and he cuts one of the two simonim. Next, hashochim and atzavor. Right again, that's the way to do shchita. The Torah wants you to shech the throat where he hits the simonim and not in the back, the nape, through the neck. Hamolik min atzavor plitzaso psula. So even you might have said that maybe the Torah gives us two options in the case of malika. He could do either malika from mul arpo from the nape, or he could do it from the front, from the throat. No, it's got to be from the nape. So malika is always the reverse, the exact opposite of shchita. Kol ha'oref kosher malika, v'kol ha'tzavar kosher l'shchita. Nimsa kosher v'shchita posel malika, kosher malika posel v'shchita. And the Gemara is going to ask why the Mishnah had to repeat what we already learned. My oref. Okay, so the Mishnah says that you cannot do shchita mina oref. You have to do malika mina oref. Lema oref mamish. If we're talking about the back of the head, then even in malika that's not okay. My area shochet. Apparently, malika, even though it starts on the neck side, as opposed to the throat side, malika on the neck side is not lowered down where the neck is, but rather on top where the skull is. Again, it's from behind, but through the skull, if I understand correctly. Is afil molik name mimul orpo rachmana rachmana velo orpo. It's not the back of the head, but mul orpo. What is mul orpo? It means it faces the back of the head, right? Because the back of the skull faces the back of the head, which is where the neck is. So let's just see if he adds anything that'll. I don't see anything here right now. Elamai oref. So what does it mean when the Mishnah says that the oref is unacceptable for shchita, but it's acceptable for molika? Mimul oref, right? Because the pasuk says mul orpo. So mimul oref means that which faces the back of the neck. Hiriktani seifa kol oref kashel malika. The phrase kol oref, the entire oref, suggests an area of significant size. Hence, it would not be used to connote the back of the bird's head, which is often quite small, but rather Mishnah refers to the back of the neck. I don't know, I'm getting a little nervous because that sounds like the opposite of what I just said. Imul orpo. Right? Not orpo, but mimul orpo. Not the back of the head, but that which faces the back of the head. Okay, we'll give it another try. As we go along, maybe it'll become more clear. What's the difference between the back of the neck and that which faces the back of the neck? That's what I'm trying to figure out over here. Okay, we said that the back of the neck is very small, but there's the kala oref, the entire oref. That's a larger area. So minani mili. How do we know that the shchita, the malika of an oaf is in the back of the neck? The Tanura, when we learned to the Brisa, we had the pasuk that we quoted at the very beginning, mul orpo, mul haroa es oref. As we said before, it faces the back of the neck. And another pasuk, the Gemara is going to ask why you need another pasuk. For who yoshev mimuli, v'yomer kipanu elai oref v'lo pnim. My God is angry at Hashem, at the people of Israel, because they turned the back of their heads towards me. Not the face, but the back of their heads. My v'yomer, why do you need a second pasuk? Chitem, you might say, oref gufe lo yadinan hecha. I don't know exactly where the oref is. Deneda mul tidei hecha, so we can know what's mul orpo, tashma from this pasuk. Ki panu elai oref v'lo panim. Michal di oref lahadi panim. Now lahadi means opposite. So it's opposite the face rather than opposite the neck. That's what I was saying before. I don't get it. So in Yirmiyahu, God complains that the people have turned away from him rather than towards him. The verse does not say they turned their oref towards me, rather than the front of their neck. Rather, it says they turned their oref towards me and not their face. This proves that oref is the back of the head, which is opposite the face. Right? The face is up front, and mul orpo is the back of the face, which is the back of the head, but not the back of the neck. I mean, again, the only thing I could tell you, Rabosa, if you don't have a better shot than I do, is that the malik has to be a little bit higher up in the back, not exactly on the bottom of the neck. So, b'li neder, I'll try to check it out again and see if I, can find, a picture of it. Amri b'nei Reb Chia, right? The young children of Reb Chia said mitzvahs malika machzir simonim lachori ha'orif malika. Oh, this is very interesting. The children of Chia came to the conclusion that before the Kohen does malika on the back, he has to grab the simonim and somehow swing them around to the back in order to do the malika. Ika di Amri. Now, in the first lishna, it sounds like the Bnei Reb Chia was saying that's the only way that malika is acceptable. But according to the second lishna, af machs, meaning you have two options. You could either do the malika directly through the oref, mimul oref, and then cut the simonim, or you can somehow swing around the simonim to the front. Ikadar machs dafka. Mistabra, the Gemara said it's more logical to assume Kiman di Omer af machsir. It doesn't have to be machsir, but it's an option. Mimai, midiktani, right? The Mishnah says, Hashochim min ha'oref shchitaso psula, hamolik min ha'oref malikaso kshera. So what do we see from this? Now we're on the top of the chav. Isal kedaitach machsir dafka, if you're going to say that the only way that you can implement a valid malika is by moving the pipes behind the spine, is my area molek. Right? Why does the Mishnah say that malika from the nape is valid and shchita is not? Afilu shochet nami. If malika may not be performed unless the pipes are behind the spine, then the Mishnah states that malika from the nape is valid. It must be referring to that case. Consequently, the Mishnah's parallel ruling about shechita from the nape, also, which is possible, also refers to a case where the pipes were behind the spine. But if that be so, why does the Mishnah rule that shechita from the nape is invalid? If the pipes are behind the spine, the animal is not rendered a treifa before it's slaughtered, and there's no reason for the shechita to be disqualified. It's the same as shechita from the side of the neck, which is valid. Therefore, it's evident from the Mishnah that the Mishnah is speaking of a case in which the pipes were not shifted behind the spine, and nevertheless the Mishnah rules that the malika is valid. So this proves that when Rav Chia's sons said that one fulfills the mitzvah malika if the pipes were first shifted, they meant that one could also perform malika in this manner. Shma mina af machsim asnisim v'lo ahader. Our Mishnah is talking about a case where he did not move it to the back. Okay, then this is where we'll stop for today on Daf Chaf, and tomorrow we're supposed to meet at 9:30. Is that correct? Okay, thank you very much. Have a great day.